Soul Sunday. How do you know what is the life or the path that is meant for you?
That is such a good question. And I think about this question in four different tenets, right? So I feel like each of us are born into a particular environment. In that environment, you're going to have life obstacles, circumstances, situations, things that are going things that you're going to have to overcome. Adversity, right? You're going to have to figure out how to navigate that world through all of the things that help you to navigate your own sector of the world. From that process, you're going to gain life experience. Through those life experiences, you're going to gain a sense of empathy for people like you who are in that same struggle. And from that place of empathy, you are going to want to be an agent of change and a person of resolution. And how do we fix this particular thing? How does my talent lend me to be a change agent for this particular set of circumstances? And I think that those gifts that God give us help us in that way. They help us in the way of connecting all of those different things and then bringing our own God-given gifts to a field or career that utilizes those gifts for a particular problem. If I use myself as an example, so I was born and raised in the urban area, young parents. My parents were on drugs. There was a lot of drugs in my environment, a lot of lack in my environment. There was a lot of broken homes in my environment, the challenges that come with being in an urban area, right? Through that, I gained a sense of not only awareness, but empathy for people like me. And I wanted to be a vessel for people like me. And I was a born leader. I don't mind challenging authority. I saw myself being the best person to represent my community because you can read as many books as you want, you can watch as many movies as you want, until you have lived a thing, have done a thing, have gone through a thing, you are limited on what your scope of a thing is. And so in choosing social work as a career for myself, that was the natural evolution of my process. And God made it that way. And He gave me every tool I needed to be an effective social worker. And that's how I knew I was on the right path. And so when I acquired my master's degree as a social worker, I knew that not only the accomplishment of it, but I knew that God had positioned me for that moment. So I think everybody has a path. And I think that the challenge in life is finding your path and finding how all of the things that you've gone through and all of the adversities and all of the life's experiences and relationships and all of those things, how does that align with who you are at your core? And how does that put you on your God-given path?
Here on earth, whose life doesn't have a purpose or a path?
No, I don't think that there is. I think that if you are living and breathing and you're here on this earth, then God is not finished with you and you have a purpose and you have a path.
Every choice you've ever made in your life is leading to whatever decision you're making in any given moment.
Exactly.
So how do you know when you are on the right path? And what dream belongs to you, or what husband belongs to you, or what job belongs to you?
I think you know when you're on the right path when you are settled internally in spirit, when your course is direct and focused, and when your tools are aligned for the work that you're doing. I think that when you are in a position where you have found your place of service, because I feel like we all have a place of service, no matter where your path no matter what your path is, I feel like we all have a place of service. So once you found your place of service, once you have identified that that place of service comes from the core of who you are, once you have acknowledged that your history, or what we call baggage sometimes, lends to you being the most effective in that position, in that space that you hold, in that place of service, all the other things God are going to align so that you can fulfill that mission, so that you can fulfill his purpose in your life. And I think that's how you know you're on the right path. When you are chasing a path that's full of obstacles, conflict, it's just never settled. It's a me situation. Then you are not positioned and you're not aligned. And because you're not positioned and you're not aligned, the universe isn't going to allow you to be successful in those missions. You're only going to be and see true success and happiness and fulfillment when you are on your God-given path. And that's the challenge for a lot of us, because sometimes what we want for our lives is not what God wants for our lives. And we may spend years chasing this thing that we thought that was supposed to be our path, and it's not, and we never are settled in what where God would have us. And I think that that's a challenge for us, just as people, just as humans. As far as our dreams are concerned, I think that is the challenge, right? Because sometimes we chase dreams that we may feel very passionate about, but it's not aligned with our God-given path. And so we spend years, some of us spend a lifetime chasing dreams that doesn't align with what God wanted us to be doing. And so, as I said before, I feel like when all of your things are coming together, when the universe is aligning and putting things in path that support what God wants you to be doing, it all works out. With regards to a husband, I think for women, that is probably the most difficult, because we will tell you hands down, we know God put him here for me, right? But at most times that's not the case. I think that when it comes to marriage, two people have to enter into a relationship wanting the same thing. And I think that a lot of times in life, we don't negotiate those things in the beginning. We get into relationships where we feel like the person just knows what we want, or we have these expectations as to what that person is supposed to be, or just because they are physically an adult, they are supposed to know how to do things, when that is not true at all. For most of us, we come from broken homes where we haven't seen a pattern of successful relationships, right? So we can't go into relationships with all the tools naturally. So I think that what works, and what I have found works for my husband and I, and he is the absolute love of my life. What worked for us is that we met at a time in our lives where we wanted the same things, and those things were communicated. We talked about what we wanted in our future. We talked about what we wanted for ourselves. We talked about goals, dreams, and aspirations. And we had cardinal rules and things that we knew that we would never be able to come back from in a relationship. And because we had those conversations, and we were both honest in what we wanted, and we were true to what we wanted, it made the relationship, now marriage, a lot easier, because I don't think marriage is as hard as people make it out to be. I think it has to do with the people and being in line in the beginning of the relationship, and knowing when those goals, dreams, and aspirations are not aligned, and knowing when to say, we've tried and we need to move on.
When you have more respect for yourself, put yourself in a position where you can, feel your sense of value or worth. What is the difference? Because I have a lot of married friends, and everybody talks about how difficult, how, it's work, a relationship is work, it's work, it's work. What is the difference between betraying yourself and compromising?
Everybody says marriage is a lot of work. I don't feel that way. I don't feel that it is hard work. I feel like when two people are aligned, when they love each other, because that's major, that's important. You will never have a successful marriage when only one person loves one person. You both have to love one another, and you have to love one another with the same vigor that the other person loves you. And you have to love yourself in the same way that you love that other person. You have to love yourself more, because I feel like there are things that's going to happen in marriages or relationships, period, where betrayal is always going to be a question. And I feel like sometimes we, and particularly women, we sacrifice ourselves. We're always the sacrificial lambs. If our feelings are hurt, if we experience infidelity, anything that happens, we are always quick to put ourselves almost on a chopping block. And I feel like that is the difference between betraying yourself and compromising. In compromise, there's never any room for self-betrayal, because a compromise says that you're going to give a little, I'm going to give a little. But on these particular core issues, I'm not going to budge, because these are core to who I am and what I believe. They are my foundation. And with them being my foundation, I am going to remain unmovable in those things, right? And those are your core values. Those are things that are not negotiable. So in my opinion, the difference between betraying yourself and compromise is that compromise does not leave room for self-betrayal. Compromise to me means that we don't totally agree 100%, but I'm going to take into account your position, and you're going to take into account my position without us having to agree on every point. So in this, you are going to give a little, I am going to give a little, and we're going to have a resolve that doesn't 100% satisfy either of us, but we both can live with, right? When you betray yourself, no one gets hurt but you. When you betray yourself, you betray the core principle of who you are. You rock your internal foundation. You shake your core. The only person that gets hurt in a self-betrayal is you. That is not a compromise. When you are compromising, two people have to give something. But when you betray yourself, you're the only person that has to give. And generally, in a betrayal, a self-betrayal, you never win. You will never, ever win. You'll never win if you sacrifice or negotiate the core of who you are as a person. The worst thing that one can do is betray themselves, because God put in all of us intuition, insight, things about ourselves and things about other people. We have signals in ourselves that let us know when things aren't right. All of those things are inbred in us for a reason. So we have to trust ourselves, and we have to believe in ourselves and understand that we are the agents over ourselves. And to negotiate any part of that is not a compromise. It is a betrayal of yourself.
Just had an aha listening to you. I love it when that happens to me. I've often thought that and it's because of your use of the word betrayal. I've often thought, having experienced being betrayed by a close member of my family years ago, thinking that was the worst, that there's nothing worse than being betrayed. And just hearing you talk about it today, I think there's nothing worse than betraying yourself.
Yes, and that's it. Self-betrayal is the worst betrayal of all. Absolutely.
How does grace work?
Well, when we're talking about God, right, grace is unmerited favor. Unmerited favor. It's infinite forgiveness, right? But when we're talking about people, it's much harder. I feel like grace sometimes is hard. And I think that as people, we have to grow to a place where we are in a position to offer grace unimpeded. I think that comes with age, it comes with maturity, it comes with life experience, right? It comes with a sense of God and a sense of self that I think that we're always trying to get to.
Sometimes exactly what you described also happens, but I feel that, are we not in a constant state of grace?
I would like to think that I was a person of grace, but I'm not. I'm not a person who lives in a state of grace. I have to work on it because, I am a human. And sometimes our own personal feelings and emotions and life's experiences and all of those things get in the way when the situation calls for grace. I'm growing in that area. God is still working on me in that area. And I think that's true for most people because especially in the world in which we live now, grace is not the first thing that comes to mind when you feel like you've been wronged or someone hurt your feelings or you took a text out of context. We don't automatically go to grace as our go-to, right? So I think that that's a place where we should strive to go, but for sure, as humans, that's not our first stop. But I think that that's obviously a goal. It's a goal for me. I want to be positioned to be able to extend grace to people and have people extend grace to me because Lord knows I need it as well.
What does the word prayer mean to you?
Prayer is a space of surrender, right? Prayer puts us in our most vulnerable state, the most naked state. Think about it. You're talking to or having a conversation with someone who already knows every single thing about you, every single number of hairs you have, every single thing about you is already known. So prayer is more about guidance and helping you to adjust and respond to your life circumstances. So in prayer, we surrender, or we supposed to surrender, because prayer means that you don't have the answers. It means that you are at odds with what you think you should do, what you should do, what you have the tools to do, or what you expected to do.
What is the difference between knowing how to surrender the thing and knowing when to surrender and doing nothing?
So the difference between surrendering and knowing when to surrender versus doing nothing at all, knowing when to surrender has to do with being out of options, right? And we've all been in those positions where you've tried everything. And when you've tried everything, there's nothing else to do but stand. And that's when you surrender and allow God, who has infinite resources, infinite wisdom, infinite everything, allow God to navigate a situation that you're not equipped to navigate. When we learn to surrender, that becomes a challenge for each of us as individuals because, we are a people of will and we go on our own will. And for some of us, it's a hard crash and burn before we realize that we are up against forces that we are not equipped to deal with. And for a lot of things, you have to surrender and allow God to handle it. And be okay with the outcome, even if the outcome isn't what you thought it should be. Now, to do nothing is to simply say that you are not positioned to have resolve. You don't want resolve. You don't care. So surrendering and knowing when to surrender and absolutely doing nothing. I guess the difference in the three would be wanting resolve versus not wanting resolve. It may even be a place of needing to take accountability versus not wanting to take accountability. Or it could be a place of understanding that you're not in control versus admitting that you're not in control. But I think that life teaches us, and sometimes it smacks us on the behind until we get it. And it teaches us that surrendering is God's way of trusting Him to do everything that you need Him to do, and no matter how it all works out in the end, it's going to all work out to your benefit and in your favor. And that's what surrender will do for you.
What is your definition of God?
What is God? God to me is rule. Is rule. He is the starter and finisher. His word is law. God is law. God sets the guidelines by which we all should live in peace with one another, in peace within ourselves, in peace with the universe. God is love. How we should love one another in accordance with His rule. And in my belief, the book before us that was here long before we were here, the Bible gives us the teachings of God. And even if you took the Bible away and we mark God as just a being, not even making Him assigning Him a gender, just God as universe. There are laws in the universe. Those laws are meant to govern us as individuals, as people, as humans. Universal law, to me, is what God is. God is universal law. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and I'm going to take my lesson from you. So I'm taking my cues from you. Show me the way. That was great.